What made a desperate cowboy trust the one healer the whole town had learned to fear? Hold the lamp steady. Clara's needle hovered over Ethan's wound as wind rattled the cabin glass. Wyatt's knuckles whitened around the lamp, while his brother's breathing suddenly stopped. Clara caught Wyatt's sleeve. "If you want him alive, trust me." Then her hands began to shake, and Wyatt didn't yet know why. "What would you do in his place? Tell me below." The knock came sometime after midnight, hard enough to shake frost loose from the window frame. Clara Bennett looked up from the shirt she was mending beside the stove. For a moment, she did not move. Nobody came to her cabin after dark unless they were lost, desperate, or too ashamed to be seen at her door in daylight. Then came the horses. Hooves struck the frozen ground outside. One animal snorted hard, breath steaming in the cold. Clara set the shirt down. She took the oil lamp from the table and crossed the room. Another knock. "Ma'am?" A man's voice. Low, tired. "Please." Clara opened the door only halfway. Snow blew across the threshold. A tall cowboy stood beneath the porch roof, his hat dark with melted snow, coat soaked through at the shoulders. Behind him waited a bay horse trembling from the hard ride. Another man sagged across the saddle. Young, unconscious. Blood had soaked through the cloth wrapped around his side. The cowboy looked at Clara. "Are you Clara Bennett?" Her fingers tightened around the lamp handle. "Who's asking, Wyatt Cole?" He glanced back at the man on the horse. "My brother Ethan." The young man gave a faint sound that barely passed for breath. Wyatt stepped closer, but stopped before crossing the threshold. "Folks in town said you know how to stitch a wound." Clara's face changed, only slightly, but Wyatt saw it. He also saw her eyes drop to her own hands. 3 winters had passed since anyone had asked those hands to save a life. 3 winters since the last table, the last fever, the last family standing over her while everything she had done was turned into something ugly. "You should take him to Dr. Pierce," she said. Did Wyatt's jaw tightened. He wasn't there. Clara said nothing. "The stable boy said you might help. That stable boy talks too much. He said you were the best chance Ethan had." A gust drove snow between them. Ethan groaned. Clara lifted the lamp higher. "Bring him closer." Wyatt did. She pressed 2 fingers beneath Ethan's jaw, then pulled aside the blood-stiffened cloth at his ribs. The wound was deep. His skin had gone pale beneath the cold. Clara looked toward the road. Marlowe lay miles away through snow and darkness. There was no time. She stepped back. For one long second, Wyatt seemed afraid she would shut the door. Instead, Clara opened it wide, put him on the table. Wyatt carried Ethan inside. The cabin smelled of pine smoke, dried sage, soap, and the coffee Clara had left cooling near the stove. He laid his brother across the heavy kitchen table while Clara moved quickly around him. "Take off his coat." Wyatt obeyed. "Build the fire higher." He threw another split log into the stove. "Pot." He found one hanging near the wall. "Water?" "Pump outside." He started toward the door, buckets beside it. When he came back, Clara already had clean cloth folded beside Ethan, scissors laid out, a bottle of spirits uncorked, and a shallow tin basin near the lamp. Nothing about her looked uncertain now. "Hold this." She handed Wyatt the lamp. "Higher." He raised it. "Steady." His hand stopped shaking. Clara leaned over Ethan. Wyatt watched her examine the wound with quiet, careful movements. No panic, no wasted motion. This was not the reckless woman the town had described. This was someone who knew exactly where her hands belonged. "You've done this before," he said. Clara did not look up. "Yes, how many times? Enough!" Ethan's breathing caught. Wyatt bent toward him. "Ethan, don't move him!" Clara's voice sharpened. Wyatt froze. She reached for a curved needle and length of boiled thread, then stopped. The room grew quiet except for the stove and the wind rubbing snow against the cabin walls. Wyatt watched her fingers. They trembled. Just once, so faintly another man might have missed it. Clara stared at the needle in her hand as if it belonged to another lifetime. And suddenly, Wyatt understood something. She was not afraid of the wound. She was afraid of what might happen if she tried to save another man. Clara closed her eyes for half a breath, then opened them. "Keep that lamp steady, Mr. Cole." Wyatt raised it closer. Clara bent toward his brother, and the hands Marlowe had spent 3 years condemning went back to work. The lamp burned low over Ethan's face. Wyatt stood on the other side of the table, one hand wrapped around the brass lamp stem, the other resting near his brother's shoulder. "Don't move unless I tell you," Clara said. He nodded. She cleaned the torn cloth away from Ethan's side, then pressed fresh linen against the wound. Her movements grew steadier with each breath. The shaking was gone. Her hands remembered. 3 years earlier, those same hands had been welcome in nearly every house between Marlowe and the foothills. People used to send boys on horseback for Clara Bennett when labor came too early, when a ranch hand broke an arm, when a child's fever would not come down. Her mother had taught her before she was tall enough to reach the medicine shelf without a stool. How to listen before touching, how to watch a patient's eyes, how fear could make a person lie about pain. After the war, her mother had treated men who came home carrying scars no coat could hide. Clara learned beside her. By 26, folks around Marlowe knew Clara could handle things Dr. Samuel Pierce sometimes could not. They trusted her, until Henry Whitaker died. Thomas Whitaker's only son had come home from a cattle drive with a hard fever and pain low in his belly. Clara had told them early that the sickness was dangerous. She sent for Dr. Pierce. He came late. He examined Henry quickly, gave Thomas something hopeful to hold on to, and left. By sundown, the young man was worse. Thomas Whitaker had stood in the hallway demanding Clara do something, so she did. She stayed. She worked. She tried everything she knew. Henry died before morning. By noon, the story had changed. People no longer said Clara had stayed when the doctor left. They said she had interfered. They said she had taken chances. Thomas Whitaker said his son might have lived if Clara had known her place. Dr. Pierce never corrected him. That silence did more damage than any accusation. Within a month, Clara's patients stopped coming. Within 2, the landlord wanted the front room she used as a treatment room emptied. Her mother's instruments were sold with the furniture when debts came due. The same people who once waited on her porch began crossing the street when they saw her. So Clara moved to the cabin beyond the last fence line and learned how to mend shirts for men who would not let her mend them. Now Ethan Cole lay on her table, and the past was breathing over her shoulder. Clara Wyatt's voice pulled her back. Ethan had gone still, too still. Wyatt leaned toward him. "Ethan?" No answer, his face drained. "He ain't breathing. Stay where you are." "Clara, Wyatt." It was the first time she had used his name. He stopped. She bent close, checked Ethan, then shifted her hands with quick purpose. Wyatt took one step toward the door. "I'll get somebody." Clara caught his sleeve. "No." His eyes snapped to hers. "You want your brother alive?" "Yes, then trust me." The room held still. Wind pressed against the cabin. The coffee cup on the shelf rattled faintly with each gust. Wyatt looked down at her hand gripping his sleeve, then back at her face. "All right," he said. "Just that. No question, no doubt." Clara released him. "Hold the lamp higher." He did. Minutes dragged. Then Ethan coughed, a small sound, weak but alive. Wyatt shut his eyes. His shoulders dropped as if someone had cut a rope holding them tight. Clara did not celebrate, not yet. She finished the work carefully, tied the last stitch, covered Ethan with blankets, and sat beside him until the color began creeping back into his face. Near dawn, she finally straightened. He made it through the worst of tonight. Wyatt stared at his brother. Will he live? I think so. It was not a promise. Wyatt seemed to understand that. He set the lamp down and looked at Clara. Thank you. She turned away before he could see what those two words did to her. Outside, the storm had weakened. Gray morning stretched across the snow. Far down the road, beyond the cottonwoods, a wagon moved toward Marlowe. Clara stepped to the window. A rider passed the lower fence, then another. Someone had seen Wyatt Cole's horses tied outside her cabin. By breakfast, the feed store would know. By noon, the church steps would know. And before sunset, Thomas Whitaker would know. Clara rested 2 fingers against the cold glass. Behind her, Ethan breathed steadily. Wyatt stood beside the table watching her. The town had spent 3 years calling her dangerous. Now everyone in Marlowe was about to learn that a Cole was alive because Clara Bennett had ignored them. Ethan's fever came that afternoon. By sundown, sweat had soaked the collar of his shirt, and his breathing had turned restless again. Clara moved a chair beside the bed she had made for him near the stove and changed the cool cloth on his forehead without complaint. Wyatt stayed. He slept in his coat against the wall when sleep took him at all. Each time Ethan stirred, Wyatt's eyes opened. On the second morning, Clara found a fresh stack of split pine beside the porch. She looked toward Wyatt. He was repairing the loose hinge on her gate. You don't have to work for your lodging, she said. He tested the hinge once. I know, that was all. Later, Margaret Hayes arrived carrying eggs beneath a wool shawl. She stopped when she saw Wyatt. So, Margaret said, looking from him to Clara, you're the reason half of Marlowe has forgotten its breakfast. Wyatt almost smiled. Likely. Margaret checked Ethan, then squeezed Clara's arm before leaving. That afternoon, a woman came quietly with a little boy whose cough rattled deep in his chest. Clara examined him by the fire. The mother placed 2 coins on the table. Clara pushed one back. You need flour more than I need that. Wyatt watched from the doorway. The next day, an old ranch hand came with 2 swollen fingers after a gate crushed his hand. Clara wrapped them, showed him how to keep the swelling down, and accepted nothing but a sack of potatoes. People came at dusk, then earlier. Soon they stopped checking the road before knocking. Wyatt noticed. He also noticed Clara always washed her hands twice after every patient, that she kept dried herbs in labeled paper packets, and that she drank coffee only after it had gone nearly cold, because she forgot about it while working. By the 4th night, Ethan's fever finally broke. He woke asking for bacon. Wyatt laughed once, low and relieved. Clara stood at the stove with her back to them, but Wyatt saw her shoulders loosen. You saved him, he said later. Clara folded a clean cloth. He survived. That ain't the same answer. It's the only one I give. Their eyes met. Wyatt did not argue. Something changed in that silence. Not gratitude anymore. Something quieter. When Ethan was strong enough to ride, Wyatt took him home to the Cole Ranch, northwest of Marlowe. 2 days later, Wyatt returned alone. He brought coffee, lamp oil, and a new pane of glass for the cracked kitchen window. Clara looked at the supplies. I didn't ask for these. No, then why bring them? Because you were almost out. She stared at him a moment, then stepped aside. Coffee goes on the shelf. Wyatt began coming back. Sometimes with an excuse, a fence staple he needed Margaret's opinion on, a question about Ethan's stitches, a jar he claimed Clara had left in his saddlebag. Sometimes he brought no excuse at all. One afternoon, he helped Margaret clear an old storage shed behind Clara's cabin. Beneath a collapsed shelf, Wyatt found a narrow wooden case wrapped in canvas. The brass latch was green with age. He opened it. Inside lay several old medical tools, dulled but carefully packed, along with folded scraps of paper. Wyatt unfolded one. Mrs. Bennet saved my husband's hand after the mill accident. Another. Clara stayed all night with our baby when nobody else would come. A third carried 6 names. Thank you for bringing our men home alive. Wyatt looked toward the cabin. Through the window, Clara was standing over a kettle while afternoon light fell across her face. The town had not always feared those hands. Once it had depended on them. And then it had chosen to forget. Wyatt closed the case carefully. Before he could carry it inside, hoofbeats sounded on the frozen road. A deputy from Marlow stopped at the gate. He handed Clara a folded paper stamped with the county seal. She read it once, then again. Wyatt watched the warmth leave her face. What is it? Clara handed him the notice. Thomas Whitaker had filed a formal complaint accusing Clara Bennet of practicing medicine unlawfully and endangering the public. A hearing had been called, and if Whitaker got what he wanted, Clara would not simply lose the right to heal. She would be ordered out of the territory. The hearing was set for Saturday afternoon in Marlow's meeting hall, above the feed store where the floorboards always smelled faintly of grain and dust. By noon, every bench was full. Thomas Whitaker sat near the front in a black wool coat, one hand resting on a silver-topped cane. He looked older than Clara remembered, but no softer. Dr. Samuel Pierce sat 2 rows behind him. He did not meet Clara's eyes. Wyatt stood beside her. Ethan stood on his other side, pale still, but upright. That mattered. Whitaker rose first. He spoke calmly. That made it worse. He reminded the room of his son, of the fever, of the night Henry died, of Clara's hands on him when respectable medicine, as Whitaker called it, had failed. Then he held up the complaint. This town has already buried one young man after trusting her judgment. Are we meant to wait for another? A few people shifted in their seats. Clara said nothing. Wyatt felt her hand tighten once around the folded gloves in her lap. Whitaker kept going. He spoke about rules, licenses, order. He never once said grief. Then Wyatt stood. He did not raise his voice. My brother was bleeding out on a winter road. The room quieted. I took him to Dr. Pierce first. He wasn't there. Pierce looked down. I took him to Clara Bennet because she was the only person left willing to open a door. Wyatt pointed toward Ethan. He's standing here because she did. Whitaker's face hardened. One fortunate outcome does not erase the past. No, Wyatt said, but the truth might. The room went still. Wyatt turned toward Pierce. Where were you the night Henry Whitaker died? Pierce's face changed. He rubbed one thumb against the edge of his cuff. No one moved. Samuel, Whitaker said. Pierce stood slowly. His chair scraped the floor. I was there early, he said. His voice was dry. I examined Henry. Whitaker stared at him. Pierce swallowed. I told myself it was something less serious than it was. A murmur moved through the room. Clara did not blink. Pierce looked at her then. For the first time in 3 years, I knew she was worried. I knew she had reason to be. Whitaker rose halfway. Careful. Pierce shook his head. No, I've been careful long enough. He faced the room. I left. She stayed. No one breathed when the boy worsened. She tried to save him. I knew afterward she had not caused his death. Whitaker's face went white. You let me believe. I let everyone believe what was easier for me. Pierce's voice broke. I was afraid of losing my standing, and she lost everything instead. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Whitaker looked around the room as if searching for something to hold on to. There was nothing. Only Ethan standing alive, only Pierce shaking. Only Clara sitting straight-backed with her gloves folded in her lap. Whitaker turned toward her. For 1 second, anger rose in him. Then it faltered. What remained looked older, smaller. "My son is still dead," he said. Clara stood. "Yes." Her voice was quiet. "I know." Whitaker looked at her. "You expect me to forgive you?" "No." She stepped into the aisle. "I don't need this town to love me." Her eyes moved across the faces that had once turned away from her. "I need you to stop standing between sick people and the help they ask for." No one answered. The complaint was withdrawn before sunset, not because everyone suddenly became brave, because the lie had finally become harder to carry than the truth. Clara left the hall before the room emptied. Wyatt found her later on the hill behind her cabin. The snow had thinned there, exposing patches of brown grass. She stood with her coat pulled tight, looking toward the mountains. He came up beside her carrying a narrow wooden case. Clara glanced down, her breath caught. The brass latch was worn green, the leather corners were cracked. She knew that box, she had known it as a child. Wyatt held it out carefully. Clara did not take it at first. "Where did you get that?" "County seat." She looked at him. "A junk dealer had it." Wyatt's mouth tightened. "I figured it belonged somewhere else." Clara reached for the case. Her fingers stopped just short of the handle. For the first time since Wyatt had met her, she looked afraid of something that could not hurt her. He said nothing. He only waited while the wind moved quietly through the dry grass. Then Clara put both hands around the box she thought she had lost forever. The latch gave with a small click. Inside, the instruments lay wrapped in old cloth, a curved needle, 2 forceps, a narrow blade in a worn leather sleeve. A small bone saw she remembered her mother sharpening beside the stove. Clara touched the handle of one tool with the tip of her finger. Her face did not break, but Wyatt saw her swallow. I sold these," she said. "You had debts, I know." She looked at him. "How much?" "Doesn't matter. It matters to me." Wyatt took off his hat and rubbed one thumb along the brim. "I sold 2 calves early." Clara stared at him. "You did what?" "They were mine to sell. That money was for your ranch. It still is." She frowned. He nodded toward the box. "Just not in the way I figured." For a while, neither spoke. Then Clara closed the lid carefully. "You think buying these back fixes what happened?" "No." Wyatt's answer came quick. "I think they belonged in your hands, that was all. No speech, no promise." Clara looked away toward the Sangre de Cristo peaks, where the late sun had turned the snow pale gold. Weeks passed. The room beside the Cole Ranch kitchen became a treatment room first because it already had the best light. Then Wyatt built a separate cabin 20 yards from the main house. One window faced east. Another looked toward the barn road. Margaret Hayes planted sage, mint, and yarrow behind it once the ground softened. Ethan nailed up the sign crooked. Clara made him take it down and hang it again. The second time, it read straight. Clara Bennett healer and physician people came slowly. A ranch wife with a feverish child, a trail hand with a swollen ankle, an old man who apologized twice before crossing the threshold. Clara treated them the same. No speeches, no punishment, just clean cloth, careful hands, short questions, and that quiet look she gave when she needed the truth. Dr. Pierce came one morning carrying a wooden case of bottles. "I thought you might need supplies." Clara looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. He began helping twice a week. Never as the man in charge, he seemed to understand why. Thomas Whitaker stayed away until spring. A sealed envelope arrived with the county post. Inside was a bank draft and one sentence in Thomas's hand. "For those who cannot pay." Clara read it once, then placed it in the ledger. She did not forgive him out loud. She did not refuse the money either. That evening, Wyatt found her on the porch. The mountains were purple in the distance. A coffee cup sat cooling beside her. He leaned against the post. You forget that every time. Clara looked at the cup. I know. Wyatt picked it up and handed it to her. Their fingers touched, not moved away quickly anymore. You happy here? He asked. Clara looked toward the little clinic, at Margaret covering the herb beds, at Ethan arguing with a stubborn gait, at the warm square of lamplight in the window. Yes, Wyatt nodded. Then he took a breath. I used to think a man protected his family with land, a good fence, and a rifle over the door. Clara looked at him. And now I think some things only hold if somebody trusts you enough to stand beside you. He took off his hat. Clara Bennett, I'm not asking because you need saving. Her mouth softened. I know, I'm asking because I want every morning I've got left to start with that coffee going cold somewhere near you. Clara laughed, quietly. Wyatt smiled. Then he held out his hand. Marry me. Clara looked down at her own hands. The hands that had been blamed, hidden, wasted. The hands that had brought Ethan back from the edge and opened a door in Wyatt Cole that had been shut for years. She placed one of them in his cha. 1 year later, another knock came after midnight. A father stood outside the clinic holding a frightened little girl wrapped in a blanket. Behind him, Wyatt was already lighting the second lamp. The man looked at Clara. Dr. Bennett? Clara opened the door wider. Yes. He stepped inside, and this time no one whispered about the woman at the edge of town. No one warned him away. They had finally learned what Wyatt Cole had learned on the first winter night he met her. Those hands had never been dangerous. They had always been a gift. And maybe that is what stays with us after Clara's story ends. Not the accusations, not the cold nights, not even the years she lost, but the simple fact that she opened her door again. Imagine standing where she stood. Imagine having the thing you were born to do turned into the very thing people used against you. Would you still reach for that needle when another life depended on it? Would you risk being hurt again? Clara did. And Wyatt did something just as important. He didn't ask her to become smaller so the world could accept her. He trusted what he saw with his own eyes. Then he stayed beside her while she learned to trust herself again. Maybe that is what real love looks like sometimes. Not grand promises. Not rescuing someone who cannot rescue themselves. Just a steady hand beside yours when the old fear comes back. A warm lamp in the window. Someone who sees the part of you the world tried to bury and quietly says, don't hide it anymore. If you had been in Clara's place, would you have opened that door again? Tell me in the comments, and if stories about second chances, quiet courage, and the kind of love that helps people find their way home mean something to you, subscribe and stay with us. There are more lives, mysteries, and healing stories waiting just beyond the next stretch of road.